And joining me now for an exclusive interview is former Foreign Minister of the Czech Republic, Jan Lipavský. Good evening to you, Minister.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure to have you. Let's start with Ukraine. So Russia's deploying these nuclear-capable Oreshnik missiles. Washington says it's effectively halting any peace talks until there is something fruitful. Is the war back at square one, or worse, back at the day that Donald Trump assumed office last January?
I would not say that there was any real move in the diplomatic negotiations in the last year. For many months, we could have observed dancing of Russia and even Ukraine diplomacy to keep the Americans involved, but ultimately it never led to any conclusion. So, and using the Oreshnik, I think it's the Putin way how to show some kind of reciprocal attack for the big attacks which we could observe from the Ukraine side, especially towards Moscow. There is no military reason for using Oreshnik as such, since it's a very imprecise weapon, but it's also almost impossible to shoot it down. So it was a demonstration of force.
Now, Finnish President Alexander Stubb, he's talked about Europe opening direct negotiations with Vladimir Putin. He's also not ruling out that person being him. Now, previously on this very program, you told me that whoever speaks with Putin has to have a strong mandate, speak as a united voice with Europe. Is President Stubb the man for the job in your view?
He might be such a person if he is given such a mandate. One number, it's 30% of all military aid is provided by Germany to Ukraine nowadays. So I think this, who has cards in his hands, that's what Donald Trump was saying to Volodymyr Zelensky more than 1 year ago. I think it should be the player who has the cards. So I think the answer is obvious. But yes, to move forward, it would be clever for Europe to try to open negotiation channel with Russia. However, we have to understand that Russia has a real will to negotiate, and this real will be generated only by force, by sanctions, by another Ukrainian deep strikes and successes on the front line. We don't need empty talks.
So, Minister, you're saying the representative speaking directly to Vladimir Putin should come from Germany?
For example, it should come from such a player which will have a backing by strongest countries. And of course, all the other European countries need to be informed, need to be on board. We don't want to be witnessing any kind of separate talks. That would be very dangerous for European unity.
It brings me to Ukraine's EU accession. Is it time to put Ukraine in the EU, no matter what, including through this associate membership mechanism that German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has suggested? So no voting rights, but access to mutual defence clauses.
Honestly, this idea, which started just recently to float in the EU, it's not something which I would admire. I think the EU has a good processes for accession clusters, and we should focus on this kind of discussion, how to make it real, not how to be looking for some kind of a special way. And like with every council of foreign ministers, the Ukrainian minister is regularly participating. Ukraine relationship with Europe and with many countries is very close. So I think we should really stick to the real promise, and that's something which also people of Ukraine expect from its government to do so. On the other side, we need to be very practical, and we need to also understand that Ukraine, with its might, with its military force, it's important for us, and therefore we would make the Europe stronger by having Ukraine in the EU.
Isn't there an argument, Minister, to create some kind of solution where Ukraine perhaps has a partial membership, or at least has a partial membership for now, and then sees steps into full membership with the EU? I spoke to the EU's ambassador to Ukraine last week. She suggested that it was time for some kind of creative solution, that the current system isn't so fit for purpose when you're talking about a country at war. do you think that this argument, that a creative solution has merit?
Or the creative solution is just to do it, think strategically and see it as an important element making us stronger. Of course, there is many issues ahead, for example, agriculture, policies or rule of law and fight against corruption. On the other side, to put Ukraine through all these scrutiny makes also sense. And I would say that the strategic alliance between the EU and Ukraine is already there. Yes, of course, if there would be any real hurdle on the way, maybe then we should think about some different kind of solutions. But I would say this is premature, and we should not be resigning on the big goal of having Ukraine in the EU as such, even before the first clusters were open.
Of course, a big sticking point for Kyiv is that rule of law. Is your reluctance to do with the fact that Ukraine is not ready to join the European Union right now? Because many would say the answer to that question is no.
But the fact that the Ukraine is having, for example, the anti-corruption agency NABU and all the other connected agencies and laws, and that we are also observing quite high-profile corruption cases. It's given by the fact that the Europe and European states and European Union is pushing on Ukraine to reform and to keep these institutions intact. So I would say that the closer Ukraine is to the EU and the level of rule of law in the EU is healthier for Ukraine and therefore even for us, because we will have a strong ally on our side. I know those discussions are not always easy, but the EU accession is making Ukraine a better place in this regard.
So maybe a partial membership is a good reward for that, Minister?
Yes, I would see it in this way, yeah.
While I have you, I do want to ask about the broader Central and Eastern European region, including the Visegrad 4 format, that's Poland, Slovakia, Hungary and the Czech Republic. With Petr Magyar now in charge in Budapest, are we looking at a new era of regional ties across Central and Eastern Europe?
Definitely the change in Hungary is a huge breakthrough for the possibility to have a strong V4 cooperation again. It was split between Poland and Hungary, which basically froze all the activity in the V4, and I can just understand the Polish side that they didn't want to connect with the Orban government on the V4 platform. So there will be some meetings. They will be organized by the Slovak presidency in the next half of this year. So that will really show how the 4 leaders or 4 ministers of affairs or the head of the parliaments are able to work together. And of course, one thing is to meet for courtesy, shake hands and have a coffee, and the other thing is to have a real agenda together. I understand that between Poland and Hungary there is now will to be looking for such agenda. Let's see how Czech government led by Andrej Babiš or Slovak government led by Mr. Fico will react to those proposals. But yeah, we have to keep our neighborhood relationship strong. So I'm looking forward to see the development.
You rightly point out that there is political will. Petr Magyar, of course, in Poland last week, and he called for the V4 summit to be expanded to include Austria and other countries. So I'm interested, do you think there's really impetus for the V4 to be reignited, or is this trying to reheat a dead format?
So my experience from a broader Central European format is that this is always very nice and neighborhoodly mooded meeting, but the real agenda then dissipates. In the EU, you have different kind of coalitions based on interests of specific states, being in migration, being development, for example, of economic relationship and things like that, competitiveness, and even here in Central Europe, in V4 countries, we differ. So I am a little bit skeptical to such kind of proposals, because if we don't see strong common agenda even in V4, then putting more actors into that one definitely make it stronger. But yes, of course, it's always nice when neighbors are meeting and discussing issues. So why not? Such meeting might have a sense.
Former Foreign Minister of the Czech Republic, Jan Lipavský, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World for more news and analysis. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.